Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest batch of listener questions. On this episode, we're asking if Thomas Müller is still good. We're asking where Celtic would finish in the Premier League. And we're getting into the old club or country debate. Here we go. My name's Ryan Bailey, Power Trio on the feed today. Graham Ruthven's here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. How are you?
I'm marvellous. I'm doing wonderful. Ready to delve my little hand into that sack of listener questions, pulse them out, and ask you all about them. Yeah.
You're the best question picker. That's why we employ you and for that role.
Thank you. I mean,
the transfer window is still
until this point.
Transfer window is still open. We could find a replacement, but
I mean, in this market,
now you're doing the job.
I could go for 150 million in this market, Graham. Frankly, Alexander Isak can. See yesterday's pod, listener. Joe Lowry, hello. How are you?
Hey, one of my favorite moments from yesterday's show that we haven't talked about yet is Graham saying Benjamin Jesko can shoot from anywhere, and Ryan says, yeah, so can I. That's awesome. That needs to be my response when people talk about, wow, this guy's like long-range shooting is a difference-making thing, because it almost never is. Like, maybe there's two players alive where that is actually true. I'm gonna start saying that, Ryan. And I'll credit you every time I do it. It'll be long and painful, but, it'll be worth it.
As a rec player, Joe, is it your inclination to have a poke from distance, or would you rather sort of pass it into the box?
Make the next pass, mate. Make the next pass. Only optimal decisions when I'm playing soccer. I mean, only optimal decisions when I'm not turning the ball over needlessly in central midfield. But other than that, optimal all the way.
Graham, you were hitting hope from.
I don't play for goals. I play for nutmegs. We established that this week.
Long range nutmegs, 25 yarders.
Yeah, just blooting it through the keeper's legs. That counts.
Got to aim for something. Very good indeed. Before we get to our listener questions mailbag, let me tell you about our Patreon, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, where you can find bonus content, including bonus listener questions hitting the feed left, right, and centre. We've got bonus video content, and perhaps the funnestest of all, our Discord server. Come and join us. Have a chat with us in there. It's jumping, so say the kids. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show to support us, please, and thank you. All right, so let's get to our listener questions mailbag. The first question of which was plucked from the aforementioned Discord, from Andrew. Brendan Rodgers recently said that Celtic would be a top 6 team in the Premier League. Where do the guys, especially Graham, think they would actually finish in the Premier League? The pause there for effect, of course. I am sceptical of Brendan Rodgers here, Graham. When I first saw this question, I thought, okay, top 6 is a bit much. Maybe top of the bottom half would be real reasonable. And the more I looked at the numbers, the more I thought, I think Celtic would be in the Championship. I think ultimately, soccer at this level is about how much you spend, right? So Celtic's squad value, according to Transfermarkt, is 131 million euros. Leeds, who are just promoted to the Premier League, their squad value, according to Transfermarkt, 278 million euros. So double Celtic's squad value. So using that metric, which is a very important metric in the modern game, I think Celtic would struggle. What do you think, Graham?
Yeah, not for the first time. Brendan Rodgers is talking absolute nonsense, because Celtic would be nowhere near the top 6 in the Premier League table. I don't know. I didn't catch this this quote like firsthand from him. I don't know whether he is talking about like the size of the club, or maybe he means that there's always this argument that if Celtic and Rangers were in the Premier League for a period of time, over time they would maybe rise to that level. But that feels like I'm stretching. I'm doing a lot of legwork here to try and rationalise his comment, which is just complete rubbish. I think if I was dropping Celtic into the Premier League of last season, Celtic were actually pretty good last season. They made it out of the league phase of the Champions League. They had that really impressive performance against Leipzig in the league phase in the phasing, when they pretty much demolished them. And then they pushed Bayern all the way in the knockout round as well. They were about 30 seconds from taking them to extra time. So looking at that table and knowing how bad Southampton, Ipswich and Leicester were last season, I do think Celtic would have stayed up last season, but it feels like we had an exceptionally bad bottom 3 last year, and so I think generally that's where Celtic would be in the Premier League table. I don't know if I fully agree that they would be like a Championship team if you're just placing them in terms of quality. I think they are probably a little bit better than some of the teams at the top of the Championship, so I think they're very much like bottom of the Premier League. And like last season, you look at the attack that they had for much of the campaign: Kyogo, Kun, Maeda, Then Ray Hatate, Arnott Engels, Callum McGregor, I think, has always had the quality to play in the Premier League, just hasn't because he's a Celtic fan and he's the captain of that club. So there is a lot of quality in that Celtic team that I think would keep them out of relegation trouble. But maybe this season the promoted teams are going to be stronger, and maybe they would be down in that bottom three.
Yeah. What are your thoughts here, Joe? As Graves mentioned, to Celtic's credit, they do sometimes, or reasonably often, pull off a European surprise and a little run in a knockout competition. But over the course of a Premier League season, the circumstances are a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's impressive to me that Celtic pull off some of those results in Europe because of how drastically they have to change their style, right? When they're playing league games, they are controlling the ball because they have the talent advantage. You come to Celtic to do the kinds of on-ball stuff that you get to do in that league. And then when you go and play major teams in Europe, you have to shift because if you leave so much space in behind you, you're going to be punished by that more often than not. So it is impressive to me how Celtic balance those things. It is a testament to their quality. But my reaction to this concept is absolutely not. Like there's just no way that this would possibly happen. I looked at the Opta Club power rankings, which I think are a helpful tool with these kinds of discussions. Opta has Celtic just ahead, if they were to enter this Premier League season, of Burnley, Leeds, and Sunderland, the three teams coming up, but behind everybody else. So in that world, if you have then one extra team in the league and you still only relegating the bottom three, maybe they would avoid relegation. But I think instinctively that felt right to me anyway. I look at this roster, and there are players that are above this level, but there's a lot of like top-tier MLS players in this team. Like literally top-tier MLS players. Alistair Johnston in this team. I think about Austin Trusty. Cameron Carter-Vickers is not an MLS player, right? But he would be a good MLS center back. He is not, and we have a good pile of evidence of this because it never quite worked out for him in the Premier League. He is not a Premier League center back. And you run through this list of players, and there are a lot of guys that I think are just underneath that threshold. Now, Graham, you laid it out well. There are some players in this team who I absolutely think are Premier League level players. But there are also a lot of players that are not, and you marry those things together, and that's what we see with teams that are promoted, where you get a nice mix of, yep, this player is at this level, this player is not, and you end up with a team fighting relegation.
Yeah, I hadn't actually looked at the Opta rankings, so I feel somewhat vindicated by them dropping it exactly where I said they would be. That feels about right for Celtic.
I think Brendan Rodgers must have meant that Celtic would be a top team 6 in attendance in the Premier League. That I could see.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of size, that's an entirely different discussion. But
okay, well, let's
talking about
where do they fit in size, Graham? If you had to give your, because I know we talk about this a lot, like big club. What does this mean? And I don't really know what it means, to be honest. I don't think anybody does. But in the Graham Ruffin big clubometer, which we've talked about on the show before, where do they fall in the Premier League? This is what it's about now. It's not about on-field play.
Okay, this is so intangible, it's unreal. Everyone has different measures, but I'll just give you off the top of my head. So, for me, Manchester United are the biggest club in the Premier League. Second is Liverpool. Third is Arsenal. Fourth is Chelsea. Fifth is Man City. Now we're starting to get to Celtic territory. Sixth is Spurs, and then I think Celtic territory. I think they'd be like seventh. And that's like where I would drop Rangers and
just
Celtic
missed the top
in
six.
About then.
What a shame!
Darn it! Rodgers was wrong.
Confirmed.
They'd be in that. They're in the kind of Newcastle territory, like big club, but maybe not cracking the top six just yet.
There you go.
Ryan, would you agree? Or
yeah, I think you're spot on there. I'd say, anecdotally speaking. Graham, there's often a debate about Celtic and Rangers joining the Premier League. Remind us your stance on whether that would be a good thing or a bad thing, or whether would it be at risk if they did that, and then maybe it would destroy Scottish soccer if they did that.
Yeah, I think there's probably more negative than positive to be gained from. I think it would be fun. Like it would open it up. It would open up Scottish soccer, and we'd have a different title challenger every season. Because Scottish football below Celtic Rangers is incredibly volatile. Where you have teams like Hearts and Hibs and Dundee United going not just finishing low in the table, but often being relegated down to the Championship. So, and in terms of like who's finished third over recent seasons, we've had Motherwell, Kilmarnock, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen. So it's always very competitive below Celtic Rangers. That would be fun. But I do fear a scenario where we become a bit of a backwater like the Irish League or I don't think we'd ever we wouldn't be quite as much of a backwater as like the Welsh League, but you get the point I'm making. That would be my fear.
All right. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for your question. We go to Cam Tate with this one. What are your favourite single-season teams of all time that maybe aren't widely remembered because they didn't win significant silverware, but they were still great? The example given here is the Ajax team of 2018-19, which, if memory serves, was a few seconds away from a Champions League final under Erik ten Hag, and then they got pulled apart mercilessly the following season and thereafter. I've got a couple of nominations.
All for what? All for what, Manchester United? We could have had that glorious Ajax team for another season, but no.
Just had to go and ruin it, didn't you? Yeah. I've got a couple of noms, Joe. Anything standing out for you?
I wanted to hear your noms. Give us at least one nom. Give us a taste.
Okay, fine. So obviously, like, if we're not going to go the significant silverware route, the Leicester route, I think my actual favourite, and this is going to be a random poll, and guess what? It's from the 90s.
Yep.
Middlesbrough, 96-97.
Wow, I didn't think we were going there. Is that the Ravanelli team? Is that Ravanelli?
Yes,
it is. Yeah. Right, you were just looking very blankly at me.
Yeah. So I think I had to jump in my connection there. But Middlesbrough were promoted to the top flight for the first time in a long time the previous season, 95-96. And they had Brian Robson, Man United legend, as player manager. That's fun. And in that following season, they finished 12th, all right, in their first season back in the Premier League the previous season. So the one I'm talking about, they were like, right, we're going to, all guns blazing, we can be better than 12th. And this was a Middlesbrough team who were quite exciting. They had a brand new stadium, the BT Cellnet Stadium, I think it was called at the time. Yeah, old school telephone networks.
That ages it so much.
Yeah, but they were, for Middlesbrough, which is an industrial town in the northeast, not a million miles from sort of Sunderland and Newcastle for geographical reference. They were this exciting, glamorous team, like the likes of which the Premier League didn't really have elsewhere. So they had Brian Robson, obviously, as manager. They had players like Emerson, the Brazilian midfielder, who was like completely came out of the blue for them. Fabrizio Ravanelli, as you've mentioned there, Graham, from Juventus. And this was like a huge statement getting Ravanelli pretty much at the end of his prime, I would say. Some other names from that team. Robbie Mustoe, okay. Mikel Beck, Branco, another Brazilian defender. Mark Schwarzer was in there. Juninho was a little diminutive little midfielder. Yeah. He was great fun as well. So, obviously a great team. But what I love about this team is they reached the FA Cup final. They reached the League Cup final. They lost them both and got relegated. That's why I love this team.
That is football heritage right there. Yeah. It's like a Wigan without even having the trophy to show for your efforts. Yeah. You made the final, you didn't even win the final. But I've
do you know what's worse though, Graham? Sorry to interrupt. They made both finals. Wimbledon, my team, that same season, made both semi-finals and lost both semi-finals. That's worse. But we didn't get relegated.
No, just disappeared a few years later.
We didn't get a Wembley trip, and we disappeared thereafter.
Yeah. It was like a curse on the cup competitions that season in English football. I remember maybe slightly, I would have been like 5 or 6 at that point. But that's when I was starting to get into football, so I vaguely remember that team. And I remember the Brian Robson photo shoot from when he was announced as the player manager, where he's wearing the shorts and the blazer on top, the shorts and the football boots with the blazer. It's a classic of the genre. As
a player manager, elite look, I would say. So there you go. I think that's my main nominee. Who wants to jump in with another favourite single season team?
I'll go on mine. Mine are much more recent and a little less abstract than that. Although I do have one that is like right up my alley in the way that was perfectly up your alley. This is early, but I'm going to buy my stock in this team as an all-time, the real ones remember kind of team. Barcelona from this past season. I'm sorry. But that is going to go down as one of the weirdest, wildest seasons ever. Their tactical approach with the offside trap. There was a point last season, about midway through the season, where they had drawn teams offside 50 more times than any other team in the Big Five leagues. What they were doing was wild. It was epic. It was crazy. It's going to be remembered as maybe Lamine Yamal's real statement season when it comes to his on-field play. Pedri, young talent galore. I mean, we've talked about this Barcelona team a lot. But they didn't have the ultimate European success. So they do absolutely fit into this category. And that's what it takes, I think, to have that European success, to be remembered as one of the big 2 clubs in Spain. If you're going to have a season, it needs to end in a Champions League trophy. It did not. That is absolutely one on my list because I think it has shaped how I think about a number of the key characters of this Barcelona team and a big part of their new era. I have 2 more, and I'll go through these quickly. I don't think this one counts because they won the Champions League. But Liverpool on 97 points. 97 points in the 2018-19 Premier League season, and they didn't win. That is the 4th highest single-season points total in Premier League history. It will also not be remembered, that league campaign, in the same way that it would have been. I know, not the best nom, but really I wanted to get to this one. Phoenix Rising's 2019 team, baby. If you're actually asking for my real answer to this question, this is the answer, Can Tate. So I hope this satisfies you. 78 points in 34 matches. That's the same number of matches that MLS plays. If they were doing that in MLS, they would have the all-time points record in Major League Soccer. So that gives you some context for how good that team was. They won 20 games in a row. 20 games in a row, setting the record for the longest winning streak in American soccer history. They lost ultimately in the Western Conference semifinal, but if they had gone all the way, that would be the undisputed best season in USL history. It is not that. There is plenty of disputing about what is the best USL team in history, and Phoenix does not have that crown all to themselves. But that season, I was covering the team on the ground at the time, and I've never experienced anything like that before. Like, you don't get win streaks like that in American soccer because of how the leagues are designed. But that team was amazing. There were MLS players in there. Tristan Blackman was in there. Like, there were so many pieces of that team that went on to do fun stuff. That was a good era for me. So that is my actual answer, even if it's not the sexiest.
Nice. Very good. Graham, how are you feeling about this question?
So it's funny that the question mentions the 18-19 Ajax team, because the first team that came to mind for me was the team that beat them in that famous Champions League semi-final. I loved Pochettino's Spurs team. I just thought they were so good to watch at the time. They were good at taking talent that you'd heard of, but then giving them a platform. So I'm thinking of someone like Toby Alderweireld or Jan Vertonghen or Moussa Dembele. These were all players that you'd heard of, you knew who they were, but they took them and they just raised them to an entirely new level, which was fun. They had Son at his best around that time, Dele Alli at his best, and I think people forget just how good he was. I mean, there was a time when Kane and Dele were the two kind of big assets that Spurs had. And I thought Dele was actually the one who was going to get like a Real Madrid move or something like that. Like, he was the player I could envisage in a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or a Bayern Munich over Harry Kane. Obviously that changed pretty quickly, and Harry Kane is literally at Bayern Munich right now. But there was a poetic quality to how there was a progression for that team season on season. They were fun to watch. They reached that Champions League final, and I think everyone thought they would then take the next step. And then Poch was gone within a few months. It was kind of like a famous musician, dying before their time or something. They're just immortalised as being that good forever. So I'll always remember that team fondly. And then the other team that I would nominate is, I loved Bielsa's Athletic Club team, the one that had Iker Muniain and Fernando Llorente, Ander Herrera before he went to Manchester United. Andoni Areola was the starting right back for that team, and this was the team that went to Old Trafford. And this was when Manchester United were still in were still good. They were still in the Ferguson era, and Athletic totally turned them over at Old Trafford. I think beat them 3-2 in that Europa League game. And then similar to the Poch's Spurs, they never had their trophy-winning moment. They got dismantled by Atletico Madrid in the final, which somehow felt perfect for the end of that story. It was a bit like Billy Bean's Oakland A's losing in the World Series, so somehow that made it more poetic for Bielsa, who I don't think has ever won a major trophy in his time as a manager. Somehow that feels perfect for him. But yeah, I remember that team fondly as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Very good nomination. My other nomination is a Wimbledon one. It's not technically a single season. AS Wimbledon still holds the record for the longest unbeaten run of league games at any level of senior soccer in the UK. 78 games unbeaten between February 2003 and November 2004. So it's spanned over 2 seasons technically, but that is a period technically we've got promotions in that period as well, so it doesn't quite count. But it led me to a conversation I was having, Graham, with my brother a few days ago, and it was about kits. And the theory is you like a kit more if your team did well while they were wearing it.
Oh, totally, yeah.
So, I was going through my favourite Wimbledon kits, and I said, I really like that Hummel one. My brother's like, yeah, we got tanked every week while we were wearing that. And I was like, oh, what about this one? He's like, no, we got relegated wearing that one. And it does cloud your perception of a kit and a team depending on what they're wearing, I think.
And what's even more impressive, and people don't know this about Graham, is that he has only ever bought kits of relegated teams. So every kit that Graham buys is just a relegated team. Imagine how many he would have if the rest of the teams were open to him. It's impressive.
Well, my collection is almost complete, Joe. I don't have an England kit.
Gotcha.
They've been relegated, so
there's time.
Yeah,
there's time.
I'm shaking my head. This is the only time I'll ever encourage you to buy some MK Dons kits. That's what I'll say. Graham, thank you very much. And thank you to Kante for that question. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Victor Osimhen and Thomas Müller. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Cole Friedrich has been in touch with this one. Why did Victor Osimhen sign with Galatasaray and not a team in a top 5 league? With several Premier League teams on the hunt for a striker, why didn't any of them seem to be interested given his status among world strikers and relatively low transfer price? Graham, the Gala deal with Osimhen is now permanent. So why is he in Turkey and not at a league with a higher stature? I mean, when he first went on loan to Galatasaray, there was this perception that Napoli had sort of botched the whole situation. They didn't get the money they should have got for him, and maybe they could have done from a other top 5 league. What are we thinking?
Yes, I think it all comes down to money, or it largely comes down to money. I do think Osimhen enjoyed himself out in Turkey, and when you're getting paid a fortune and you're winning trophies and scoring lots of goals, it's going to be difficult for another team to make a sales pitch that is better to him than that. So I think there is an element of he is happy in Turkey. He's idolised at that club. He wins stuff. He plays in European football, scores loads of goals, gets paid lots. Sounds good to me. But yeah, this summer it came down to wages, and I think it has flown under the radar a bit just how much Galatasaray are paying Victor Osimhen. So he is receiving 20 million a season net. Because there is a tax break of sorts in Turkey. So Turkey collects the second lowest amount of tax from athletes out of all the European countries. So 20 million a season.
Who's the lowest? Do we know?
I don't know. I didn't. The article. You asked me the one question, Ryan. I don't know. The article that I read did not specify who the lowest was. Who could it be? Monaco? Monte Carlo?
Could be one of those.
Ryan's just asking because he's pondering another European move, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
and a career as an athlete, yeah.
Yeah, so 20 million a season net, that works out at around €300,000 a week, which would have cost a Premier League club if they were to pay him in terms of what Osimhen, we all know how tax works, in terms of how what he would take home, what his take-home pay would be, that would cost a Premier League club around €500,000 a week to sign him. And that would have made him the second highest paid player in the Premier League behind Erling Haaland. And while Victor Osimhen is a top quality player, I think lots of teams would have been interested in him this summer. I have no doubt that he had conversations with lots of them. I guess clubs just decided against that. And it would have been possible for a few clubs to have paid that amount, but a lot of those clubs, if we're kind of identifying those clubs are, I mean, what are the clubs that would be interested in Osimhen? Chelsea, Man City, possibly Manchester United, Liverpool. All of them had like squad reconstruction to do this summer. They needed more than a single player, and so they just decided to spend that money in other ways. And Galatasaray's offer was pretty tantalising to Osimhen.
Yeah. Joe, sounds like we've got to the root of that one. Anything to add on this one?
No, just to underscore the fact that if teams were willing to pay Osimhen's salary, there's a lot of value there. Like there's a lot of quality that he can provide. And I think if you're looking at the strikers actually on the move this summer, the only one that I would be tempted to say I would rather have in my team than Osimhen is Isak, right? So I think Osimhen is so clearly a plug and play like elite striker in any league in the world. Maybe there's a little bit of physical adaptation that needs to happen from Napoli to a Premier League team. But Osimhen, one of his real strengths is his literal strength. Like, yes, he has a lot of technical quality as well, but he's an amazing athlete, and I don't really think that transition would have been all that difficult for him. So it's a miss. I'm sure there are plenty of Premier League teams that are wishing that those salary demands were different. What I will say is, and I should have done the math before this episode, that's my bad, paying Napoli 75 million euros if you're Liverpool as an example, Arsenal, maybe that's a good one. But we'll stick with Liverpool. If you're weighing up paying 130 million pounds for Isak and a salary that's going to be high but not Erling Haaland high, or going out there and signing Osimhen for a lower transfer fee but a higher salary, I don't know, man. Maybe there's a world in which the math works out on that front. So it still seems a bit odd to me that no team was like willing to get a little bit further down the field. Maybe there's there've been plenty of reports about some temperamentalness for Osimhen. Yeah. Maybe there's more than just the money side of things. I do think the wages and Graham's point about, hey, Osimhen's come out and talked about how I believe his daughter really has enjoyed being where she is and has friends there, and it's not so easy to move your family from one place to another, right? There are other things that are factors here. But man, I just keep coming back to that Isak thing and thinking maybe there's a world in which a team would have gone Osimhen. I don't know.
Yeah, I do wonder if the Napoli mess and the way things ended for him there maybe put some teams off. And I don't know if that's fair or not, because De Laurentiis has his own reputation there, but it felt like the links, last summer those links were to teams like Real Madrid and Liverpool, and then the links, the more kind of feasible links this summer started to be with teams like Manchester United and Chelsea, who are maybe a rung lower than Liverpool and Real Madrid. So I don't know whether that was something that affected his standing in the transfer market or not. Also, Galatasaray, they're paying Leroy Sané €250,000 a week as well, so they really have found some money down the back of the couch this summer, and they decided to blow a lot of it on Osimhen, which, to be honest, there are worse ways to. Turkish clubs have found worse ways to spend their money in the past, is all I'll say. Osimhen is probably the best player that's played in that league in the last 20 years.
When they funded all those dud mobile phones to throw onto the field.
That's right, yeah.
Worth, yeah.
Somebody's got to throw.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame for some of the top 5 leagues. I mean, Spain don't get the opportunity to arbitrarily give another player a suspended prison sentence for tax evasion. Pour some out for the UK version of the IRS as well, who don't get to collect 40% of $500,000 a week. I'm sure they would have loved to have done that.
Yeah, that could have been a hospital, Victor.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing out on. Honestly, my instinctive reaction when he went to Galatasaray was disappointment, because I just don't watch the Turkish Super League as much, or at all, really. Catch highlights sometimes and put them in the newsletter. But I think in this world where everything has been funneled into the Premier League and the top 5 leagues, it's kind of refreshing that he's gone outside that. And also the age that he is. How old is Osimhen? He's got to be 25, 26. I would bet there's a Premier League move or a La Liga move at some point in his future. It might just be a couple years from now.
There you go. All right, Cole, thank you very much for your question. Jojo Bajo has been in touch with this one. Jojo Bajo. Yeah. Very good. Is Thomas Müller still good? Asks Jojo Bajo. Is this all going to backfire on the Whitecaps, or will they win the cup? Yes, Joe. Thomas Müller officially a Whitecaps player as of this week. What do we think of him as a prospect? Obviously, he's been playing for Bayern Munich since, I think, 1974, if my math is correct. But he's still going very strong. But goals in the single figures in the last 3 seasons. His role's changing, perhaps. But is he still good? What do we think?
I think so. I think Thomas Müller could have played another season of useful minutes at Bayern Munich or another high-level European club. I think he is more than good enough to influence MLS games on the ball. And maybe most importantly of all, because there are some age risks here. I'll turn 36 next month. He has still been quite durable, Thomas Müller. He played 2,000 minutes this past season across the Bundesliga and Champions League. That is not an every game starter. He was much more of a rotation piece. His minutes were managed at a closer level. But from what I've found, there have not been super serious injuries for Thomas Müller in the recent past. That's huge, right? If you're going to sign an aging player, Father Time is undefeated, but you want to maximize the chances of having that player stay on the field, especially in Vancouver's case if you're going to make him a designated player next year. The other thing that makes me so hopeful about this signing for Vancouver, well, also recognizing that there's a lot of outcomes between this backfiring on the Whitecaps and them winning the cup. There's a lot of middle ground in there somewhere. The other thing that I like a lot about this deal is that it's only an 18-month deal. So Thomas Müller is signed now, and he's eligible to play now, but he is only signed through the end of next season. He'll be a DP next year, and that's it. Now maybe there's room for an extension. Maybe there's more on top of that. But the Whitecaps are not trapped in a place where you've committed to having 38-year-old Thomas Müller on your team. And that's not a place that I would love to be. At the end of his deal, he'll be 37. And that's old, don't get me wrong. Thomas Müller is in the twilight of his career. But I think if you watched his tape last year, if you watched him at all the Club World Cup, there's a player in there still. He does not have the same engine that he once had. He will not be as quick to move off the ball. He will not be as quick to press defensively. All those things are real. Vancouver, though, are uniquely equipped with the players they have, I believe. Seb Berhalter, Andres Kubas, Ryan Gauld is the working man's best 11 player where he does the defensive dirty work. He's the example for the kids in the academy. Brian White is a hard-working presser. You run through this roster, they are filled with guys who do the hard work defensively. And I don't think Muller would view himself as being above that necessarily. There are just going to be practical limitations on what he can do. So I think the team around him will be able to cover for at least some of his deficiencies. He'll change how the Caps play defensively in ways. And I think he's going to bring a ton on the ball. We think of Thomas Müller as I think even Axel Schuster, sporting director up in Vancouver, dropped in a statement Thomas Müller is the Raumdeuter, the world-renowned space exploiter, and all that stuff's true, right? He's a savvy off-ball player. There's lots of those. But he's really good at that stuff. But he's also amazing on the ball. He's not amazing on the ball relative to Jamal Musiala, but But relative to Pedro Vite, or relative to, I don't know, insert most MLS players here, he's going to be an amazing on-ball playmaker for them. So I do like this move. I think the risks are relatively low. I think he raises Vancouver's ceiling even if he drops the floor a little bit. It just doesn't drop the floor a ton.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to ask you about his role with Vancouver because you obviously watch them a lot more than I do. So you're not concerned about... So is he the Pedro Vite replacement? Vite, in my impression, is off the ball. He was part of that like aggressive press from Vancouver. And I just, having watched Muller recently, he actually had a decent Club World Cup. He looked kind of revitalised. But there were points last season for Bayern where I really did watch Muller and think he'd pretty dramatically dropped off as in terms of his physicality. So I don't think he's going to be able to do that for Vancouver. But it sounds like you're unconcerned they're going to be able to compensate for that in other ways.
No, I mean, they will be able to compensate for some of that. How much, I don't know. I think my point is that Vancouver are built to absorb some of his deficiencies. He will still make them a less effective defensive team. There's just no getting around that. But you trade that for attacking upside. And where this move lands on that scale, right? I mean, every move has that same sort of calculus to it, right? Where exactly it lands on that scale, I don't know. But I am optimistic that Thomas Müller's inability to defend at a higher level will be, number one, just less obvious in MLS because the game moves slower than it does in the Bundesliga or in the Champions League. But also it will not hurt Vancouver in the way that it might hurt, say, the LA Galaxy or insert another bad Sporting Kansas City or whatever, like bad defensive teams. Vancouver are a great defensive team, and there's room for them to drop without being just abysmal in that part of the field. I want to ask you, Graham, about Muller, but I guess you asked me about his fit in Vancouver. I don't know that he's going to be positionally the Vite replacement. I think Jesper Sorensen can use him in a couple of different roles. I would imagine we're going to see him more in the front line, like as sort of a nominal winger who drifts inside and just picks up the ball in the half space because Vancouver tend to defend, anyway, out of a 4-3-3. And I don't know if you want Muller's lack of energy right in the heart of your team. I think maybe you prefer it out wide. So I would expect him to pop up in the half spaces a lot rather than being the third center mid for them. I think we'll see Vancouver go in another direction in that part of the field. But I'm curious to flip it back to you or Ryan or either one of you guys. You've watched plenty of Thomas Müller. Mm-hmm. Do you what do you think about this move? Like I see this more from the MLS side and Müller for who I think he is, but you may have a more complete picture on who Thomas Müller is at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I'm unsure about it, to be honest. I'm less sure of this one than the Son signing, even though with Son there's a question of where he's actually gonna play in that LAFC team. But with Müller, I'm sure we spoke about him at some point last season, and our conclusion, or certainly my conclusion, I think maybe Taylor was with me on that episode, was just he's dropped off. Like, players reach the cliff edge physically. I even have concerns about when you talk about Joe, his like playmaking ability. Maybe that is something he's going to do in MLS. Like it's a less the standard's not as high as he's been playing in
Sure.
the Bundesliga. Players adapt. We talked about this with Rodrigo de Paul, right? He's never really been an elite level ball progressor in Europe, but in MLS maybe
awesome.
he is.
He's
been great.
awesome.
Yeah, he's already doing that. Yeah, he's racking up assists for Miami. So we're seeing when you drop a player into an elite level player into a lower quality league, their game can change. So maybe that'll happen with Thomas Müller. I just don't think of him as like a great on the ball playmaker. I think of him as like a late arriver in the box. That's what he was great at, Thomas Müller, and more of a finisher actually than like a playmaker. So from that point of view as well, I'm a little bit concerned. But it's fun, and as a neutral, I'm glad it's happening because Tam Müller is great banter, and when he's on form, he's a fun player to watch. So I'm interested to see how it works out.
I think, Graham, all of those concerns are completely fair. Like, those are real things, and even thinking about, Muller's game has been largely based on his movement. Like, you can't just receive the ball in a vacuum. Like, you have to open yourself into space to get on the ball. And the older you get, the harder it is to do that stuff in a way that influences the game positively. So those are all super fair. I just keep coming back to this fact that I don't think it is a huge risk for Vancouver. Like, Vancouver's roster is pretty solid, like solidly built and solidly deep, even if it's a little less deep now that Vite and is gone and Veselinovic is out for the year. It's a very deep kind of squad that I think can absorb some of the risks that Muller provides. And Vancouver have been really good without that player. Like, if Muller hits in some ways, it's not quite gravy because you've just lost Vite's playmaking, but I think you will get some of that back. I just don't see this being a move that has a ton of downside, especially because they're not trapped into a long-term deal.
Yeah.
If this is a 3-year deal, I feel differently about this. There's just no way around that. I think what LAFC and Vancouver, to loop those together, because both those deals were announced in the same day earlier this week. I think what both of them have done really well is not get trapped into long, like 3, 4, 5 year guaranteed contracts with these guys. Son's only under contract through the end of 2027. Then LAFC have option years beyond that through June of 2029. That's fantastic for a player that's 33 right now. You're not trapped into Son until he's 37 or whatever it is. And it's the same for Muller. Like, you're not trapped forever. I think that's massive, and that maybe more than anything else influences how I feel about these deals.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, Joe, and I think you're onto something definitely about the depth that the Whitecaps have, and I feel like there won't be an expectation to play the full 90 for every game.
No,
like what was there, 9 or 10 regular season games left for Vancouver?
Yeah, right in that
had
range.
A great start this season and doing very well in the West as well. I think if you have him as he can come on and play the final 30 minutes, cause some trouble, make some movement. Psychologically, if you see Thomas Müller coming on in the 60th minute as an opposition defender, you're like, okay, we got some, this is changing things a little bit, and it's they're not building a team around him, I think, is the point.
Yeah,
right, Joe. So
yes, yeah. I think he's much more cherry on top than he is like ice cream on the sundae, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they're very good. So in that case, as you say, there's a lot of upside and it's quite low risk. The one thing I am very disappointed in is that I haven't seen him in a Mounties outfit yet. Like, as a lover of horses and stuff, if they don't do that with him, I don't know what they're doing, frankly.
Yeah. Can you imagine how hard the Vancouver Whitecaps social media team is like rubbing their hands together with that deal getting done? What an absolute gold mine.
Game changed. Let's do this. Yeah, I mean, already, like, there's so much potential for all sorts of hijinks here. You mentioned it, Graham. Like, he's good banter. Like, he is one of the great characters in this sport, and that is another reason that selfishly I'm very intrigued.
There you go. Excellent stuff. Thank you, Jojo Bajo, for that question. We're going to take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about club versus country. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Christian Close, CC, has been in touch with this one. What is more important, club or country? As a dual citizen, says Christian, I would rather see the USA or England take home a trophy, even if it's at the expense of my club. Do players feel the same way? And has this sentiment changed in recent years? Alexi Lalas and Harry Kane are two who have publicly talked about prioritising their international football over their club. Now, though, it seems the newer generation of players put their club career ahead of anything else. It's a very interesting question, Graham, because it does feel like there is a bit, maybe it's just anecdotal, but a bit of a sea change among younger players in the prioritisation of the international game over the club game. Like, back in the day, David Beckham always spoke about prioritising the international game, whether that was kind of a PR line or not. It was something he put out there a lot, and how important it was to him to play for England, and obviously Manchester United too. Then you'd have someone like Jamie Carragher on the other end of the scale, who I think in his book said it was nowhere near as important for him to play for England as it was playing for Liverpool. So I think, obviously, it's anecdotal, it depends on the player, and I get the sense that maybe there's less inclination to play internationally these days when there's so much riding on the top of the domestic game, when that is the paymasters for these young players. And that is, I mean, a Champions League final, does that have higher stature than an international tournament final these days for a young player? Maybe it does.
So I think Christian's question is framed from a USMNT point of view here, because I think in a broad sense, I don't know if I do agree that younger players are putting club ahead of country, just because there's always been, as you mentioned, Jamie Carragher. I think back to Paul Scholes, who retired from playing for England very early because he just didn't like going away for major tournaments. And I'm sure there was some pressure from Sir Alex Ferguson, who had a knack of not just getting players to pull out of international duty. There's a few cases where he got them to retire early, Scholes being one of them. There's a couple others as well that escape me right now, but Jaap Stam, did he maybe retire early? And then he sold Jaap Stam like the following summer. So yeah, Ferguson was an absolute menace for that. So I don't know if in a broad sense I'd maybe need some more, I don't know if there are any data points on this, but I need some evidence to go along with that thinking. For the US, I think it's just the case that a lot of those players, we can debate whether they are better players or not, but we can agree that a lot of the US's players are at bigger European clubs now, where there's more focus, and maybe that has changed some priorities. So like Christian Pulisic here is the elephant in the room with this question, refusing the call up to the Gold Cup squad in the summer. There's a couple others as well who are at big clubs in Europe, and maybe that wouldn't have happened with the Alexei Lalas 94 US squad, because those players, for them, the US was the pinnacle. That was their main focus. That was where they were getting the most attention. That's where they could achieve the most in their careers. Christian Pulisic maybe thinks differently. Maybe he thinks the Champions League or a Serie A title is where he can achieve the most in his career, rather than playing in the Gold Cup. So I think for the US there has been a sea, what did you call it? A change in tide, or sea change. But maybe not in a broad sense.
Joe, thoughts on this one? Obviously, there is probably some cultural differences in the US to maybe Europe on this question too. You thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's totally possible. I think a lot of this is situation dependent, right? It's difficult for Christian Pulisic this summer. You have Tyler Adams, who talked publicly about how important he thought it was to be there this summer, and you sort of have both sides of the coin here. But one thing I've been thinking about with this question, I know that's not like a super satisfying answer for Christian, but I do think it is case dependent. One thing I've been thinking about is maybe there is something to this idea that even though there's still people that would go country over club, maybe there's something to the idea that international soccer has always been sort of an exercise in elevating your brand as a player, right? I was thinking about this with Max Arfsten actually the other day. So this is a recent example. I don't know if Max Arfsten is getting to be the subject of $1 million+ bids from clubs in England if he's not playing for the U.S. men's national team, right? MLS gets scouted by every team on the planet, maybe outside of like Real Madrid and some of those giant clubs. So maybe he is, and maybe this is a bad example, but I was thinking about this. I think it's at least more likely that Max Arfsten or Pat Osimhen or whatever, right? These guys make those moves on the back of breaking into the national team. The national team always has been a tool that players can use to elevate their profile. And now in 2025, there are a lot more tools that players can use to elevate their profiles than just the national team. And more than that, there's a lot more tools now than there were 30 years ago or than 50 years ago. So it seems to me that between club soccer taking up more and more of the calendar, right, where now we have an entire extra tournament every 4 years with a bunch of teams that takes up the summer and takes spotlights off of international tournaments. That's what the Club World Cup did to the Gold Cup this summer. When you have that and more games on the calendar, like Enzo Maresca coached 64 games or something like that for Chelsea this year, the club game has ballooned in how much attention it takes, which means it is harder for players to devote that attention to an entity that is not paying their full paycheck like the clubs are. Yes, you might get a national team bonus, but you really are getting paid by the club first and foremost. So your responsibility, like in every job on the planet, is really primarily to the people that are paying you like that. And the national team is not as... If your goal is to increase your brand and to give yourself more opportunities to generate money and to get fame or whatever it is that you're looking for in this game, the national team is still a tool, but it's not the only tool now in a way that it was like closer to being the only tool decades ago. So that's something that I was thinking about for this, and maybe does influence a wider group of people now to say, hey, I don't fully need to go and care about the international game in the same way. Still, lots of people care about it. Don't get me wrong. The World Cup is the most famous sporting event outside of the Olympics on the planet, maybe even more famous than that, right? It will always have prestige and allure and all these things, but maybe not quite like it used to. I don't know, just a theory.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and the attention economy comes into it a little bit as well, as you say, Joe. But you make a good point about it being a stage for your brand. Like maybe 25 to 30 years ago, if you were in if you're a fan watching a World Cup, the other teams who weren't your nation, you wouldn't maybe know a lot of the players. Yep. But now we all know all the players of all the top teams. So totally. Because they're already all on our radar on a domestic perspective as well. But I suppose coming back to it from a player's perspective, I can't shake the feeling that if you're a young player coming through, you've played 60 games in a season, and then there's an international tournament. In the back of your mind, I'd be thinking, I'm not being paid for this. I'd rather go to Ibiza with Wayne Lineker right now. Right?
Wouldn't we all?
Wouldn't we all? Yeah, yes, but also, I mean, there is still that allure, right? Like, I think the national team still has a real romantic pull to it, even if it is not quite as practical as they're the one cashing my checks. Like, players are getting compensated for playing national team games.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same. I think there will always be a drive for players to play for the national team. There will also always be players that just want to collect their real bag and that don't feel the need to extend themselves any further. Those things will always exist. Where exactly the majority lands could shift over time. But I don't know. I would imagine still young players are pretty amped. Like Lamine Yamal has the world at his feet at Barcelona, right? He's still got to be stoked to play for Spain. There's just no way. Like, this is a legendary country for this sport, and you get to be the centerpiece of that as a child. That is awesome. Like, there's no way he doesn't get excited about that. I just can't believe it.
The Catalan relationship to the Spanish national team is probably another
sure,
conversation.
Okay,
for another
but
time,
there's
the
a dozen
stands.
other examples that you can go to.
Indeed. All right, Christian, thank you very much for your question there. One last one for this episode from Eric on our Discord. If you woke up tomorrow and completely lost all prior emotional connections, positive or negative, with any club, but maintained your general knowledge about their history, their players, etc. and so on, what club do you think you'd start supporting and why? Ooh, blank slate time. Joe, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I would just be a massive, oil country club fan, I guess. I mean, I still know something about the history, but I would maybe feel less emotionally invested in some of those things, and I'd just be a PSG Ultra, I think would be a big part of this. The driver for me, still, outside of Phoenix, I suppose, to what teams I enjoy and want to be fans of are the teams that play good ball. So I suppose maybe I'd start supporting San Diego and MLS and take it that way, and there maybe wouldn't be some of the emotional ties to San Diego and Phoenix and the USL rivalry. I don't know what that would look like. Barcelona would still get me good. Like, I don't actually think my answers would change dramatically in this case if I still know all the history and all those things. But I would be attracted to the teams that are playing good ball because that's what I'm attracted to now, and I think I would still feel that in this alternate reality that Eric has proposed. So Tottenham, I would have watched every Tottenham game last year. Like, that was electric television, and that's what I want. I want to be entertained in all these things. That's my answer. If you play good ball, I'll come campaign for you.
Okay. Graham, your thoughts here? Is geographical connection still a consideration?
Yeah, so if it wasn't, I would pick Ajax. I just think being an Ajax fan must be really fun because Joe's absolutely right. A team that plays good ball must be fun to watch. I can't relate to that as an Albion or a Scotland fan, but that tends to depend on whoever's coaching the team at that point, or what the transfer strategy is. Ajax have that continuity where they always seem to play good football. And last season, actually, they deviated a little bit, and then they sacked their manager at the end of the season. Of course, related, I presume, to the fact that they bottled the Eredivisie title race in the last few games. But I think I still need that geographical connection, just because more fun than anything is watching your team in person, in my opinion, anyway. And so Stirling Albion played Hearts a few weeks ago, and they brought a huge crowd. They packed out Forth Bank. They are the largest fan-owned team in the UK, I believe, and that obviously I like that. And while they are a big team, they're not dominant. Like, I don't know if I could ever support like a dominant team that's winning titles season after season, but they do win a trophy every 6 to 8 years, so they have that moment in the sun. They have also just sold a minority share to Tony Bloom, who is already revolutionising them with data analysis and exciting signings from Estonia and Portugal and all these lower leagues in Portugal and Slovakia and all these weird countries that feels very bright and coded. And I did think to myself, sitting there watching Hearts absolutely demolish us 4-0 in the League Cup, must be quite good to be a Hearts fan right now. And they've got a good stadium as well. I think they've got the most atmospheric stadium in Scottish football. It's a good size where it's 20,000. It's not huge, but you still get that like big crowd atmosphere. So yeah, maybe should have. They've got Hummel kits as well this year, so should have been a Jambo.
A Jambo. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what the name of their fans are. The team's nickname is the Jam Tarts.
Oh,
great
yes.
nicknames as well.
Is that Cockney running
yes.
for Hearts?
Yeah.
Nice.
Sold.
Hearts
The
is a
Jam
good
Tarts, the Homer and Barts, the watery farts, as the song goes. I don't know if I should mention the last lyric of that
Well, you
song
did.
there, but yeah.
You did. Very good. I think I think the geographical connection would still be important to me as well. So if I had lost all my emotional connections to my team, I think I'd still want a community club. I'm always fighting for the underdog. I always want the underdog to win any match that I'm watching. I'd like a team that's liked by everyone, revered, if you want. great history of developing top talent. I'm just going for AFC Wimbledon again. That's what I'm getting at, basically.
See, the thing is, I've said this to you before, Ryan. AFC Wimbledon, fan-owned, sponsored by Football Manager, and there's like food trucks there, right?
Graham's in.
I should be a Wimbledon fan.
Yeah.
Good kits, Hummel kits.
Play
Or not
football.
Hummel, this year Lotto.
Checks every
Lotto.
spot.
Kits.
Yeah, they're Italian now. I want to shout out Football Manager, by the way. They've sponsored AFC Wimbledon since its inception in 2002. Not only last season did they give away the shirt sponsorship on the away shirt to War Child, they just donated the space because they wanted War Child to have it. They've donated the second kit advertising on the front of the jersey to a different company so that AFC Wimbledon can make more money this season. So they're not making anything from it. They just sponsor the home kit. They are lads. I think they're brilliant.
They are lads. I'd quite like it if they'd release a game at some point soon. Considering it's been 2 years.
Apart from doing the thing they're supposed to do, they're great.
Yeah, apart from their one job, they do everything well.
Graham, would you get any work done if they actually did release a game? I'm concerned.
No, that's my
or would you
concern.
do anything other than work and play Football Manager? That actually is an equal concern.
Yeah.
That is a concern, yeah. It is, a few times it's been close to ruining my life.
Okay.
So
Well, only a
see how
few.
it
You got
goes.
room for more. You're fine.
Yeah.
Is your eventual dream, Graham, that Football Manager releases a game where you like Matrix style plug in the back of your spine?
Oh,
and sort
yeah.
of
They've
connect
got
to
to be
the-
working on that. I mean, it's been so long since their last release that I presume that's what they're working on. That's my expectation level.
Oh wow, there you go, excellent stuff. Well, Football Manager, pull your finger out. We need Graham connected to the grid. Eric, thank you very much indeed for your question. Thank you to everybody who has submitted a listener question. If you'd like to do so, you can go to totalsoccershow.com/questions, or you can visit our Discord server and leave a question there. Patreon.com/totalsoccershow to get our bonus content and access to that Discord. But for now, thank you very much, Joe Larry, for your expertise as always, my good man.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Graham Ruthven.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And thank you, the mostest listener. We appreciate you. You have yourselves a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on the feed very shortly. But for now, bye.
I realized midway through my answer to Eric's question that I actually don't